It was a warm feeling and it filled his soul. A Marvel fanfiction written on AO3 by Grey. The link for this fanfiction will be in the description box below, so I encourage you all to go check it out. Sitting on the roof, overlooking the sunset, Peter searched for a word to describe the feeling that was stirring inside of him. It was a light and joyous feeling. It filled him completely and made him whole. It was satisfying and it calmed him to his core. It was a feeling that he didn't feel often. When he did, he made sure to savor it. He made sure to hold on to it, because that's what he does with good things in his life. He holds it. Sitting on the roof, soaking in the rays of the sun, the first word that came to his mind was warmth. "The sky is gorgeous today." Peter glanced at Tony. "It is. It's one of my favorite types of days." The man smiled and bumped their shoulders. "Mine too." "Really?" Really. Peter smiled and looked back up at the sky, watching the intermingling pinks, purples, and dance around each other. "I've always loved the sky like this. It's just so beautiful, you know? I've never been religious, but when I look at that, I think maybe there is something behind all of this. Some deity that made the world and made all of this, so that we look at the clouds, which are literally just water vapor, sit in the air and think, wow, that's gorgeous." "That's a very poetic way of putting it," Tony teased. "God or not, I think it's inspiring how most people can find beauty in pretty much anything." "Most?" "Yeah. I think that sometimes you lose the ability to find that beauty. Speaking from experience, when you're in that dark place, you can be blinded. It's hard to see things when they're so everything, even the most breathtaking things, can look twisted." Peter was glad that Tony could enjoy the sky now. "What got you out of that place?" Tony looked up, thinking. "Time," he said after a moment. "And good people in my life, of course. But people can't heal you. That's a you thing." Peter placed a hand on his chest and gasped. "Wait, so you're telling me all those romance novels I read were wrong?" he said sarcastically. "I'm so sorry to break this to you, kiddo," Tony replied before continuing. "But yeah, I had to learn that lesson the hard way. And through therapy, which can also be interpreted as the hard way." Peter hummed in response, head falling on Tony's shoulder. They sat like that, looking at the falling sun as it peaked below the horizon to awaken another part of the world. Distantly, Peter wondered if someone else was experiencing the same thing. If they were sitting by a loved one, watching the sky rise or fall, and felt the same contentment he did. A breeze suddenly blew into the air, knocking over the gift Peter had forgotten about. "Oh yeah!" he exclaimed, grabbing the black bag. He held it out to Tony. "This is for you." Tony smirked, grabbing the bag from his hands. "And I was wondering why you were toting that around all day." "Just open it." Okay, Tony said placatingly. He began to pull out the red tissue paper, and Peter could feel a humming in his veins. He hoped that he knew Tony would like it. At least, that's what he was telling himself. Tony pulled out a bright red envelope with his name on it in Peter's handwriting. He glanced at it with a raised eyebrow before opening it and pulling out the card. The card was red and yellow, and in big decorated letters it said, "I wish my dad was a hero," with a rather sad-looking Iron Man flying across the card. Peter couldn't stop laughing when he saw it. Tony's breath hitched slightly as he opened the card to reveal the next message, which said, "Oh wait, he is! Happy Father's Day, and thanks for always being my hero," with an even more jubilant Iron Man flying around in comparison. Peter had also written something, which he was most nervous about. He agonized over the card the night before, trying to figure out the right words, because how do you appreciate your all but confirmed father figure? Well, it had been confirmed, but never directly. Peter never flat out said, "Hey, can I be your son?" But he'd called Tony Dad by accident a few times before, when he was delirious and or half awake, but Tony never said, "I'm your dad," but had called him his kid a couple of times, and wrote him in his will, which Peter was still not over, by the way. So, while Peter was mostly calm about it, there was still an undercurrent of hesitancy when he watched Tony read his note. The words that he agonized over, and the sheer vulnerability in some of them, was still a little scary. Tony finished reading and set the card down beside him. His eyes were still watery and so was his smile. "Thanks, Pete," he said, and reached out to ruffle Peter's hair. Peter felt like he'd been punched, but smiled back anyway. "You're welcome." Tony opened his gift, which was a mug that said "Best Dad in the World." He thought Tony'd find it amusing, and he did. Tony beamed at the mug and looked at Peter for a few seconds. "I love it," he said, wiping his eyes. Tony put the cup down gently with the card and pulled Peter into a hug. Peter fell into it, and despite the pain he comforted, he tried to savor this moment too. The warm feeling was now gone, and in its place was melancholy and regret. Plus, he'd never hugged Tony enough. Peter? He tried to swallow back his tears. Yeah? I love you too. There was a pause as he tried to process the words that he thought he'd been rejected. The regret in Peter's heart shriveled up, and the relief he felt was instantaneous. He wondered how he could possibly feel so amazing after feeling so terrible, and couldn't come to a conclusion. Instead, he basked in the feeling, squeezing Tony. He was safe. I'm glad, Peter whispered, even though he was way more than glad. And the next day, when the sun was rising and bathing the kitchen in light, he and Tony were eating pancakes, while Tony was drinking from his new mug, and the word Peter would describe the feeling he was experiencing was warmth.